Waking up in the intensive care unit, I could just hear my wife Grace's voice on the phone. Bits of her conversation drifted to me, and I suddenly realized she was talking about my will. Panic mixed with disbelief as I pretended to be dead, eager to fully understand the betrayal happening right next to me. The moment my eyes fluttered open, a harsh white glare assaulted my vision. Where am I? Why do I feel so weak and powerless? I muttered under my breath. The faint squeaking of sensors and the hum of machinery around me confirmed my fears. I was in a hospital. But how did I end up here? What had happened to me? As I struggled to piece together my thoughts, a sharp pain pierced through my consciousness, forcing a groan from my lips. An intense thirst clawed at my throat, yet there was no one to offer me water, no soothing presence to ease my discomfort. Alone and confused, I lay there, surrounded by medical equipment I had never seen before. The 4 drips and sensors attached to me felt alien, as if I was more machine than man. My wife's voice, so familiar yet so distant, suddenly filled the room. My heart raced as I strained to listen, hoping for words of concern, but instead, I caught snippets of a conversation that chilled me to the bone. "Dr. Merritt, how is my husband? Will he remain in this state long? Perhaps we should consider more radical measures." Grace's voice, tinged with a false sweetness, did not sit right with me. The doctor's reply was cautious yet stern. "Don't anger God. Hope for the best. Your husband's chances are slim, but you mustn't give up. And try to spend less time near him. We wouldn't want any accidental infections." Grace's syrupy tone returned as she acknowledged the doctor's advice. "Of course, I understand. Thank you." The sound of her footsteps receding and the door closing marked her departure, but not before a cold exchange that left me reeling. The silence that followed was broken by the unexpected ring of a phone. It jolted me, the ringtone echoing strangely in the sterile room. With great effort, I strained to eavesdrop, despite my usual disdain for such acts. After all, under normal circumstances, I, James Williams, a successful restaurant owner, would never stoop so low. But confined to this hospital bed, I had no choice but to listen. "Hello, darling. Is that you? Your number seemed unfamiliar." "A will? Yes, I've written it. Yes, everything as I wanted." Grace spoke into the phone, her words slicing through the air with precision. The conversation that followed revealed her true intentions. She spoke of managing my restaurant, of inheriting everything once I was no longer there. As she continued, my heart pounded with a mix of fury and despair. How could she speak so callously about my condition, about my life, as if I were already gone? The term vegetable, used so casually, so cruelly, left me breathless. Lying there, unable to move or speak, I pondered over the events that led me to this grim reality. How had I ended up here? Who had saved me from the fiery car crash that I vaguely remembered? The answers seemed just out of reach, obscured by pain and betrayal. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, memories of earlier, happier times came to me. I remembered waking up early, enjoying the quiet of dawn while the city slept, the comforting routine of making breakfast, the crisp air on my terrace. Life had been simple, predictable, and fulfilling with my morning routines and my commitment to a healthy lifestyle as a vegetarian, which I never imposed on Grace. Yet here I was, grappling with a harsh new reality. As I lay there, the sound of Grace ending her call with "I love you, goodbye for now," I was left to ponder the depth of her deceit and the fragility of trust. The realization of her betrayal, confirmed by her own words, was a bitter pill to swallow, harder still to digest than any physical ailment could ever be. As I stood outside my restaurant, skillfully maneuvering a shovel to clear the snow off the steps, onlookers seemed intrigued by the sight of a well-dressed businessman handling such a mundane task. Henry, the janitor, watched me with a respectful nod. "You're quite skilled at this, James. Where did you pick up such extensive practice?" I flashed a smile, memories of my youth flooding back. In the village, of course, at my grandfather's place on the distant outskirts. He had quite a lot of land there. I'm not much into hunting, but picking mushrooms, berries, or fishing, always up for that. So there was a lot of snow there in the winter. You'd wake up, and it's dark in the hut, all windows covered in snow. You take a shovel and go ahead. Henry looked at me with undisguised sympathy. He knew I was a good man, someone who never offended him with word or deed, and sometimes even stood up for him, especially in front of the administrator who enjoyed bullying those weaker than him. Just then, the wind picked up, and Andrew, the restaurant administrator, shouted over the gusts, "Mr. Williams, what are you doing? The wind is so strong, and you're thinking of clearing snow? You'll catch a cold for sure. Where would we be without you then?" I turned to face Andrew, catching the deceitful and flattering tone in his voice. "Oh, come on, Andrew, it's nothing. I'm not a kid after all. Tell me, how are things at the restaurant? The suppliers didn't let us down, did they? And are all the staff at work?" At the mention of the staff, Andrew grimaced as if from a toothache. "Yes, everything's in place, except for that dishwasher. What's her name? Emma? No matter how much you scold her, she never comes to work on time." I handed the shovel back to Henry and looked disapprovingly at Andrew. "You very well know that Emma has 4 children, whom by the way she raises on her own. And I've asked you not to call her a dishwasher. Emma is a kitchen worker or a kitchen staff member. Learn to respect your subordinates. Without that, you can't build a proper workflow." The sharpness of my remark made Andrew shiver, and he glanced sneakily at Henry, who was grinning ear to ear. Ah, he heard it loud and clear. Look at him, grinning shamelessly. "Well, no matter, we'll sort it out. Let's just get rid of the boss first and then tighten the screws on everyone else." At that moment, Emma Fisher appeared from around the corner, hurrying as fast as she could to get to work, walking straight through the snow. "Oh, here comes Emma. So what's the excuse this time? Did the bus break down? Or did you come up with something more elaborate?" Andrew began, but stopped under my piercing gaze. "Sorry, Mr. Brown. The bus got turned around on the road. Had to find alternatives." Emma replied apologetically, her nose running. "All right, off you go and make sure everything is in order. Clean the dishes thoroughly, so they squeak when I touch them," Andrew concluded with a stern look. Emma nodded and hurried towards the entrance door. At that moment, she awkwardly stumbled on a step, causing the sole of her boot to skid on the surface. I was the first to react, supporting Emma at the most dangerous moment. "Oh, thank you. I'm sorry for being so clumsy," she began to apologize. "Don't apologize, Emma. It's not your fault. But perhaps Andrew should finally get to work and sprinkle some salt on the pathways," I remarked, emphasizing the last word. After that, I took Emma's hand to help her ascend the slippery steps. Despite not wearing gloves, her palm felt very warm to the businessman. But then, something very strange happened. Emma suddenly let out a loud gasp and jerked her tiny hand away. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" I asked with concern. Emma guiltily lowered her gaze, clutching her hand into a fist. She looked frightened, not like herself at all. "I'm sorry, please. It's not your fault at all. It must have been my imagination." "Sorry again?" Emma forced out, fear freezing in her eyes, a fear I could feel in my skin. But what was it about? What did I do wrong? Did I squeeze her hand too hard? No, it didn't seem like it. Shaking my head in bewilderment, I hurried after Emma. I caught up with her in the hall where I quietly called out to avoid attracting the attention of others. "Emma, what happened? Why did you react so strangely?" She froze and looked at me with a strange pity.
"I'm sorry."
"It's all because of my visions." "Visions?" I exclaimed in confusion. Emma paled. "Well, the ones that come true, you know, like premonitions, but real. They started back in school when I got a concussion during a PE class. We were climbing a rope and I fell. The height wasn't much, but that's when it all began." I frowned. "And what did you, may I ask, see in these visions?" Tears suddenly filled Emma's eyes. "It's a car accident." "What color is your car?" "Dark green." "When I touched your hand, I immediately understood that car will be involved in a terrible accident. But it won't be your fault. It will be someone very close to you. I saw it the moment I touched your hand. It struck me like lightning." I looked at my colleague with irony. I didn't believe in any prophecies, of course. In my understanding, it was sheer nonsense, and all these fortune-tellers and seers were just charlatans. There was that one madam who predicted a long and thorny path to success for me back in my student years. And so what? The path did await, of course, but it required a great deal of hard work, and those predictions had nothing to do with it. Emma looked at her boss with concern, realizing he didn't believe a word she said. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams, but I heard you refrain from driving for the near future," she said. I just smiled. "Oh, don't worry, Emma. I've been driving for over 10 years and I've had no issues with it. Besides, I never exceed the speed limit, so there's no need for unnecessary concern. An accident is definitely not in my cards." Emma nodded in agreement, looking at me as if I were already doomed. "All right then, get back to work and don't dwell on the negatives. By the way, how are your little ones? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll help however I can," I said as I headed to my office. "Thank you, everything's fine, Mr. Williams. I just need your permission for something," Emma cautiously asked. "Permission, of course. Go ahead. What do you need?" I replied. The dishwasher hesitated for a moment as if gathering her strength, then said, "I want to ask for your permission to take home the dishes that customers rejected. Just 1 or 2. I'll pay for everything. Can it be deducted from my salary?" I smiled. "Yes, of course. What's the matter? And no payment is necessary. They're going to be disposed of anyway. Besides, it seems both you and the kids will benefit. Take as many as you want." Joyful sparks danced in her eyes. This was real luck. Meanwhile, I went about my usual business, talking on the phone with the restaurant manager, approving menus, and preparing for the inspection, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Yet, from time to time, I remembered Emma's words, which had struck a chord with me. Can you believe it? A kitchen worker with fortune-telling abilities. That's a first for me. But soon, thoughts of a possible road accident faded away, making room for meetings with new suppliers, tasting new dishes, and discussing current restaurant matters with the administrator, maintaining an atmosphere of trust and cooperation. I gently resolved disputes, using the stick far less often than the carrot. Time passed unnoticed, crossing the 3-hour mark. The fury of the storm still raged, but its morning impact had diminished. The city's utilities surprisingly quickly took control of the situation and cleared most of the vital roads. Although there was still an hour and a half left in the workday, I decided to leave early today. An interesting plan had matured in my mind regarding how I could fill this February evening with an aura of love and romance. I decided to pampose my spouse with a gorgeous bouquet of roses, a bottle of wine, and something delicious from my own restaurant kitchen. While the last 2 items didn't take him much time, searching for flowers in the snow-covered city turned into a real quest. To my immense dismay, most of the flower pavilions were closed. Most likely, the owners of the stalls had decided that there would be hardly anyone interested in buying flowers on such a day. And just when I was almost losing hope, I noticed that one of the shops at the street corner was still open. With a joyous heart, I parked my car by the roadside and stepped inside. The pavilion smelled pleasantly of roses, tulips, and freshly imported. After all, it was the end of February, which meant Women's Day was just around the corner, leaving barely 2 weeks for preparations. Inside the flower shop, a friendly salesperson quickly helped me assemble the bouquet I needed. With my heart humming in anticipation of the romantic evening ahead, I made my way home, eager to surprise Grace, who seldom prepared dinner knowing I often ate at the restaurant. I brought with me fruit and vegetable platters, champagne, and a couple of exquisite dishes from Chef Frank, which he prepared exceptionally well. Arriving home, I decided against ringing the doorbell and instead used my key to enter. As I stepped into the hallway, soft music wafted from the bedroom. Assuming Grace was indulging in her series again, I headed to the kitchen with my bags. Placing the bouquet in the living room to surprise her later, I walked into the bedroom with a smile, only for my heart to sink as the bouquet slipped from my grasp, roses shedding petals in my sudden dismay. Grace wasn't there. The room was empty except for the TV blaring in the background. Where could she have gone, especially in such a snowstorm? Concern gnawed at me. She was not confident behind the wheel. A frantic thought struck me. I needed to check if the car was still in the garage. Just as I turned to leave the bedroom, an urgent news broadcast caught my attention. A foreign car had skidded off the city bridge, driven by an inexperienced driver. My heart raced. Could it be Grace? I had even transferred money to her card earlier for a new dress. Without a second thought, I dashed to my car and sped toward the bridge. The roads were treacherous, and my car slid dangerously on turns, but I managed to keep control, relying on my years of driving experience. Grace, however, had only recently started driving. Why had I encouraged her to drive today of all days? With the bridge just 2 miles away, my car slid once more. I slammed on the brakes, but they failed inexplicably. Faced with a life-threatening decision, swerve and potentially roll the car or crash head-on into another parked vehicle, I chose to swerve. My car rolled several times before crashing into a tree. The last thing I remember was the sharp smell of gasoline, hinting at the imminent danger of a fire. Now, here I lay in the hospital, surrounded by the constant beeping of life support machines, haunted by the realization that the girl from the news wasn't Grace but someone else. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. Grace had been seeing someone else all this time, someone she valued more than anything. And then there was the matter of the will. She had convinced me to draft it just a few months ago. At the time, it seemed insignificant, but now, every detail took on a sinister hue. As these thoughts tormented me, I made a decision to feign being in a coma, keeping my eyes tightly shut whenever Grace was near. I could feel her gaze on me, cold and calculating, her fingers itching to end my life by simply pressing a few buttons on the machines that kept me alive. The danger felt palpable, as if death were breathing down my neck. Just then, footsteps echoed in the corridor, causing Grace to retreat quickly. Dr. Merritt entered the room shortly after, discussing my case with a nurse. "It's just mind-boggling. She's ready to bury him alive, you know. Why marry such vipers?" he commented. Dr. Merritt approached my bed, noting aloud that some sensors seemed to be disabled. "Probably a malfunction. We'll need a specialist to check this, though it usually takes time for a patient to come out of a coma. I'm sure he'll survive against all odds. A miracle in such cases is quite possible," he said optimistically. The nurse, Erica, stayed behind to check the sensors. As she fiddled with them, I whispered quietly for water. Startled, she jumped slightly, then quickly regained her composure. "So, you've woken up? Why didn't you signal?" she asked. Gathering what little strength I had left, I pleaded, "Please don't tell anyone I've regained consciousness. Let it be our secret, at least for today." Although puzzled by my request, considering my wife's strange behavior, Erica agreed to keep my secret. "All right, I'll do everything I can, but you still can't drink. The most I can do is moisten your lips," she whispered, touching a wet piece of cotton to my lips. The relief, though minimal, was immensely comforting. As Erica set up an 4-drip to nourish my body, tears of gratitude welled up in my eyes. Her kindness in such a dire situation reinforced my resolve. They won't get my will and inheritance. I will recover and ensure Grace doesn't get a penny in the divorce, I thought determinedly, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. With that, I drifted into a restless sleep, while Erica reported back to Dr. Merritt, who silently acknowledged her actions, choosing to keep my progress a secret from Grace. If I were in her shoes, I'd be praying for my husband's recovery, but this witch only thinks about her inheritance, he remarked, thankful for Erica's vigilance. Meanwhile, Grace had taken control of the restaurant, imposing her will with a fiery determination that left everyone under her gaze feeling small and insignificant. Her aggressive approach was a stark contrast to my more compassionate style, and it wasn't long before she began making drastic changes, including planning to install hidden surveillance cameras to monitor everyone's every move. Unaware of my gradual recovery, she continued her tyrannical rule, believing she had the upper hand. But I was determined to fight back, for my own sake and for the good of those who depended on me. "She only has 2 of her own, and 2 more from her husband's first marriage," the administrator added obligingly. "They're all mine, and as for what my husband left, let it remain on his conscience. He's in prison now, caught stealing. He thought the kids would help him reduce his sentence, but I managed to get his rights reversed," Emma muttered through tears. But Grace remained unmoved. Honestly, what Grace needed right now was a scapegoat to show her power to everyone else. And Emma, who had the misfortune of being caught in the crossfire, became just that. So how about you, Fisher? Well, you're fired. You can go wherever you want, Grace concluded, gesturing towards the door. Despair froze in my eyes. But how could this be? Could she really dismiss me like some unwanted stray dog? The administrator didn't want to stay on the sidelines and contributed his 2 cents to the matter. Oh, and I almost forgot, Fisher, don't count on your salary. You understand, right? The money will go towards compensating the damages. The news was a devastating blow. Realizing that I had been deceived by everyone who could, I went outside and exposed my heated cheeks to the freezing wind. Seeing this, Henry couldn't help himself and approached. Shoo, dear, don't cry. Don't torment yourself, sunshine. You know Andrew is in favor right now. That's why he's doing whatever he pleases. And when Mr. Williams recovers, his reign will come to an end. And so that you don't end up completely without money, I'll allocate some from my pension for you. You can repay it whenever you can, no rush, said the janitor, embracing me by the shoulders. Thank you, Henry, for your support and protection. You see, I was counting so much on this money, and then this happened. We're struggling with the kids in a rented apartment, and the landlady keeps raising the rent, saying, "You receive child benefits so you won't become poor?" I replied, choking back tears. The elderly man shook his head, feeling sorry for me, to say the least. Such a good colleague, calm, diligent, never speaks ill of anyone. I wash dishes up to my elbows in hot water, and that's it. And this Andrew, the administrator, is a first-rate troublemaker. Henry remembered him from his work at the high school, where he had been a craft teacher for over 40 years. So this Andrew, when he was a student, behaved extremely insolently, humiliating those who were poorer than him or physically weaker. Henry once tried to shame Andrew, but it was all in vain. And then one dark night, the workshops for practicing crafts caught fire. Many blamed Henry then, saying he didn't put out his cigarette properly, but he had never smoked in his life and always observed fire safety precautions. The mystery was unraveled with Andrew, who in fact had committed arson with a group of teenage friends. Henry couldn't prove anything at the time and was subsequently fired from the school with the corresponding note in his employment record. Overall, the dismissal didn't bother the crafts teacher too much, as he was formerly retired by then and had no bread left on his plate for sure. After 17 years had passed since the incident, by the twist of fate, Andrew and the elderly janitor crossed paths again, though in quite different capacities. Now, of course, Andrew pretended not to recognize his former teacher, but Henry Brooks was no fool and had seen far too much in life to take Andrew at his word. However, James appealed to him, honest, kind, fair, just the kind of leader he should be. Clutching the money given by Henry, I slowly made my way towards the bus stop to catch my needed bus on time. Memories of the recent snowstorm loomed on both sides of the road, with dirty gray mounds of snow that had fallen several weeks ago. Lost in my somber thoughts, I trudged along the street when suddenly I heard a muffled murmuring. It turned out that I hadn't managed to distance myself from the restaurant by a decent margin, and thus I quickly turned around, thinking Henry was following me to say something. But there was no one behind me. A fairly brisk frost lingered, nipping at my nose and rosy cheeks. The mysterious sound repeated, and I realized it was coming from the nearest snowdrift. Understanding that someone clearly needed help, I cautiously approached and froze in shock. There lay a man with a bloody head, groaning softly and unconscious on the dirty gray snow. My first thought was that the stranger had simply had too much to drink and had fallen, hitting his head, but when I leaned over the young man, I immediately realized he was as sober as a judge. Without a second thought, I lifted the unfortunate man under his armpits and tried to get him on his feet. He was gradually regaining consciousness, indicating that the initial shock from the injury was wearing off. Damn! How could this happen? Bastards! Don't touch Jack! The man muttered deliriously. Meanwhile, I stooped under the weight of the stranger's body, led him to Henry's shed, thinking that the injured man was simply delirious. I tried to ignore his muttering and persevered towards our destination. The man I had rescued was definitely a vagabond and could have frozen to death on the streets in such bitter cold. Seeing my flushed face, Henry understood everything without words. Taking the man from the other side, he, with my help, quickly laid him on the cot which had once been a folding sofa. Well, that's better now. Let's treat the wound on his head. He'll probably recover soon, Henry sighed in relief, taking out bandages, cotton, and antiseptic from the first aid kit. Can you manage? Shouldn't we call an ambulance? I asked anxiously, but the janitor just shook his head. No, dear, there's no need. Why distract people from more important work? I wanted to be a doctor in my youth, but I failed the entrance exams, then spent a year and a half in medical school, decided to become a nurse, but even there, luck wasn't on my side, so I had to become a laborer. But I know how to provide first aid, so don't worry. The lad is tough, street smart. He'll pull through, no doubt. My face immediately lit up with a sweet smile as the wounded man opened his eyes and began to turn his head from side to side, trying to understand where he found himself. Easy there, buddy, easy. Sudden movements aren't recommended for you right now. Just lie down and regain your senses. Do you at least remember your name? Henry cautiously asked. The guy forced a smile. Of course I do. Connor, that's my name. Sawyer, the last name. Got beaten up because of a dog. These rich kids wanted some fun with a victim, and they chose the dog, Jack. He's a street dog, you know. He settled near the meat pavilion, not afraid of people. So when I saw that villainy, I immediately rushed to help. I took down 2 on the snow, but the third one, the jerk, hit me on the head with something. Henry nodded sympathetically. Yeah, that kind of thing happens. Don't worry. Stay here as long as you need. I have firewood and a little stove here. You'll be as comfortable as can be. Connor gratefully looked at me, who hadn't passed by, and helped him in his difficult moment. Sneaking a glance at my watch, I sighed sadly. Well, looks like I'll have to take a taxi now. There go my savings. I've already missed the bus. Connor sniffled with a guilty look and turned away to the wall. Then, feeling it was because of him, the vagabond said, Forgive me, for God's sake. I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. I've been having quite the adventures lately. 3 weeks ago, I pulled a rich guy out of a burning car. Maybe you heard about it? It was quite a loud incident. I paled and involuntarily looked at my palm, remembering what happened during the revelation regarding Mr. Williams' future. We heard, Connor. That was the restaurant owner, well, the one Henry and I used to work for. Henry replied for both of us. We don't work there anymore, at least I don't. I corrected him immediately. The guy shook his head sadly and winced from the pain. His neck was stiff, and any slightly sharp movement caused a spasm. Easy, my friend. Don't get agitated. And for saving our friend here, you deserve a special thank you. James was a very good person and probably still is. The janitor corrected himself. I just happened to be there. It's not really my territory, you see. Us vagabonds, we divide everything by districts, by yards. Step onto someone else's turf, and you'll quickly get your ribs cracked. But there, I saw it. An accident and a pillar of smoke rising from it. People were running around, wailing, but no one was rushing to save the man. The gas tank could have exploded at any moment. The vagabond began his story. Henry looked at his interlocutor with undisguised respect. Deep down, he had long concluded that Connor was a good man. Otherwise, would he have rushed to the defense of a stray dog? Unlikely. Connor took a deep breath and, touching the wound on his temple with his fingers, continued. As soon as I saw that someone could burn alive, I ran straight to the car. I smashed the glass with a cobblestone and started pulling him out of the car. And all around, there was noise, chaos, people shouting that the fuel tank would soon explode. It was all true, but you can't just leave the driver. Anyway, I made it, dragged him about 10 meters away, and then it went off. You, my friend, are a true hero, to just throw yourself into the fire for our James, Henry said sorrowfully. I looked warmly at the rescued boy and caught myself thinking that all this seemed somehow not accidental. Connor saved James. I saved Connor. After that, it was hard to believe in coincidences. Since I couldn't delay any longer, I called a taxi and went home, where 4 hungry children were waiting for me. Nathan, Anna, Peter, and Emily. At the same time, lying in the hospital bed, I gradually came back to my senses. Although my strength was minimal and I could barely manage to hold a spoon or fork, Erica and Dr. Merritt had skillfully kept Grace in the dark for 5 days. She believed I was still in a coma and was planning to disconnect me from the life support to claim her inheritance. On the 5th day, I called Erica over and asked for her help with a daring plan. "I need to leave for a short while. Do you understand?" I asked the nurse. Erica looked at me incredulously. Less than a week ago, I had emerged from a coma, and now here I was, plotting an escape. "James, excuse me, but I won't take such responsibility. What if something happens to you? What should I do then, stand trial?" Erica objected. Desperation flickered in my eyes. "Well, help me be a human, will you? I'll sign any document you want about understanding the consequences and relieving the clinic of all responsibility," I pleaded. Erica hesitated, her face a portrait of conflict, yet understanding the urgency, especially given Grace's ruthlessness. "Fine, I agree, but only if we go together, okay? It'll be calmer for both of us." Just in the evening, a couple of hours before lights out, she proposed, and I nodded in agreement. "Okay, Erica, but let's keep this between us. Not even Dr. Merritt should know, so that no one else knows," I insisted with a hopeful look. Erica nodded and began preparing for our covert departure. She gathered necessary medicines and even borrowed a walking stick from the clinic. Meanwhile, I lay back, gathering strength and contemplating the past events, my thoughts inevitably turning to Emma. God, she was right all along, I thought, tears welling up as I realized the weight of my previous skepticism. Later that evening, Erica returned with a set of clothes. "Here, get dressed. These are my ex-husband's things. He never bothered to take them. I think they'll fit you," she said with a smile. I dressed as swiftly as my body allowed, staggering under the weight of my injuries. Every few steps required a pause as I caught my breath, but Erica was there, understanding and patient, supporting me every step of the way. She had even arranged for a private driver who drove cautiously and asked no questions. Arriving at my home, anxiety surged within me. The familiar drumbeat of my heartbeat echoed in my ears as I approached the front door, keys in hand. Inserting the key into the lock, I found it didn't fit. Grace had changed the locks. She adapted to the new reality quickly, I must say, I muttered, resigning myself to ring the doorbell instead. The door opened shortly after, revealing not Grace, but her lover, clad in my own bathrobe, a gift from my late mother. The sight triggered a mixture of shock and anger in me. "Who's there, darling? Not the utilities again, I hope. I've paid everything in advance for a month, so we could relax at the resort." Grace's voice floated from behind the stranger. Pale and clenching my fists in pain, I confronted the scene before me. Grace, realizing her gambit had failed, fell to her knees. "James, please forgive me. It's not what you think. I swear. I thought you had only a few days left." Teeth gritted, barely containing my fury, I said, "I'll give you 5 minutes to gather your things and leave this house." Her lover, posturing with bravado, dismissed me. "Listen, unfinished businessman. Go get yourself treated and don't interfere with normal people's lives. It's a pity you didn't crash back then." I gripped my cane, my anger boiling over. "You won't have to wait, you bastard. You thought you buried me alive, but I survived against all odds, and I'm certain that the accident was staged. I'll make sure to uncover the truth." As I declared my intentions, the confidence of Grace's lover faltered, and he retreated into the house to change. The facade of a happy relationship with Grace crumbled as quickly as it had been constructed. I proceeded to sever Grace's access to their shared resources, blocking all her cards and accounts. Years ago, I had elevated Grace from provincial obscurity, shaping her into a semblance of a businesswoman, but no more. After such a betrayal, I was determined to see justice served. I contacted an investigator to reopen the fraud case Grace had allegedly not committed. In a final attempt to salvage her scheme, Grace lunged at me with a vase, but Erica intercepted her swiftly. The arrival of the police sealed their fate. I watched as Grace was handcuffed and led away, a mix of relief and exhaustion overwhelming me. Supported by Erica, I did not collapse but sank gently to the ground. As I recovered, surrounded not by plots and betrayal, but by genuine friends like Henry, Emma, and Connor, I considered a new future. Emma, having proved her loyalty and hard work, was offered a promotion. I openly expressed my feelings to Erica, eliciting joy and a burst of applause from our small, supportive crowd. Yes, I agree, but please, in the future, stay away from hospitals, Erica responded, her eyes glistening with tears. With laughter and plans for a future filled with love and integrity, I finally felt at peace, ready to turn a new page.